Greetings, everyone. This is Andre, and I'm here solo today as everyone else is traveling to Vegas. I, however, am not traveling to Vegas because I have commitments to my day job, which I regrettably couldn't get away from. So I'm still trapped in Oslo, Norway. But in honor of Star Trek Las Vegas, which begins tomorrow, I thought we can still talk some Star Trek. More specifically, I thought that we can discuss something that probably won't come up during not Destination Star Trek, but Star Trek Vegas, namely Star Trek's lack of international appeal, which historically has been a problem. So today I thought that we could talk a little bit about that. And that's something that I know a little bit about, because I happen to be from one of the countries where Star Trek really doesn't have any kind of a tradition. But I managed to become a huge Star Trek fan nonetheless. So, for that reason, I thought that if you're interested, I can share the story of how I came to be a Star Trek fan, when no one else around me really was. So, yeah, that's the plan for today then. But let's begin with the core problem, which is that Star Trek traditionally hasn't had any kind of international following. And of course, there is some level of international following. Star Trek does have an international fan base. Star Trek is huge in the UK, it's particularly huge in Germany, and it's also big in, or reasonably big in, South Africa, in Australia, and other places where there are still some remnants of the UK Empire or the British Empire. But outside of those, then the herd of Star Trek fans is going to be pretty thin. Like there'll be fewer and further apart. If you go to Spain, if you go to France, if you go to hell, my country, Norway, you'll still find Star Trek fans, but not that many. And you can see this in the box office of the movies. If you go back traditionally, then even in a period where spectacle movies like Star Trek should have about the same international gross or even a bigger international gross than domestically, then Star Trek lagged behind pretty badly, always. If we go back to, say, 1994, which was when Star Trek was at, in many ways, its biggest point. The original series was done, but you still had the Next Generation, which was concluding, but still huge in syndication. You had the spin-off series, Deep Space Nine had already begun. Voyager was just a few years away, so Star Trek was still pretty huge at this point. 1994 was the year when Star Trek Generations was released, and Generations was then the movie that united both Captain Kirk and Captain Picard. In the US, it grossed $70 million, actually $75 million, so it outgrossed the Stargate feature film. So in the US, it did excellent. Now, if we look at the international figures by comparison, then Stargate did pretty good. It outgrossed what it did in the US because it grossed 125 million internationally. Star Trek Generations, by contrast, grossed only about half internationally of what it did in the US. It grossed 40-something million, which at the time and the kind of movie really isn't anything to brag about. In fact, this trend wasn't bucked until Star Trek Into Darkness. That was the first Star Trek movie where the international gross exceeded the domestic gross, and even then, only by a tiny margin. So how can that be? Why is Star Trek so notoriously unpopular? Or rather, not unpopular, but why is it so ignored internationally compared to other franchises? And this is indeed the case. Now, I have a theory of why that is. And I believe it's the same basic answer as to why Star Wars can't penetrate China and the other emerging markets. that Star Trek is trying to gain entry into right now, where Star Wars wasn't before. But it's not really working out. No one cares. And I think the answer to that is that there is no brand identity that's established there from before. That certainly was the case with Star Trek in Europe, because in the US, Star Trek is founded on the original series. That's where the brand was built, and the original series also aired in the UK. I don't know exactly when it aired, but it did air in the UK and it did air in Germany. But outside of that, the original series didn't air in all that many European countries. Of course, in syndication, it came much, much later, but not at a critical time frame. And for that reason, it didn't get that initial customer or fan base that it got in the US. When the movies later came, in the US, then Star Trek was a revival. It was something that was already there in the culture. In Europe, outside of Germany and the UK, that wasn't the case. Many were introduced to Star Trek for the first time with a motion picture. And if you take the revival aspect out of it, then what you're left with is a pretty cold picture. So shortly after Star Wars, which was fun and action packed, you get this relatively dreary and dull movie. Now, to be clear, I absolutely love the motion picture myself. I am one of its fans, but it didn't have all that many fans, and it didn't win that many fans over in Europe, at least. And then later, when The Wrath of Khan came out, then again, this is also built upon the original series. It assumes you've seen the original, it assumes you've seen Space Seed. Take that out of the equation, and then Wrath of Khan is still a fine movie in its own right. But it's not going to have the same punch as if you had seen the original series. For that reason, I think that the movies never took off in the way that other franchises did that stood alone, because then Star Trek became something relatively niche. From very early on, it was established as something weird, something non-commercial, something for only the very specially inclined. I know in my country, most Star Trek movies didn't even air or weren't even broadcast in cinemas. They went straight to VHS because there wasn't a market for it. This was actually something that the J.J. Abrams movies had to struggle with, because many places people knew of the name Star Trek, but they didn't really have anything associated with it. So they had to, in many ways, build the brand from scratch, which they were reasonably successful in doing. You have to give them that. When you look at the growth from the 2009 movie to Into Darkness, because there actually was growth. Now, of course, Into Darkness had problems, so that growth halted pretty badly by the time Beyond came out. But that's actually the biggest expansion that Star Trek has had internationally, were in those movies. Too bad they couldn't keep the momentum up, because there they actually went a pretty decent way in building a Star Trek brand where there wasn't one before. And now, of course, you then have the Star Trek TV series, which is then built on the success of the movies, or moderate success of the movies. And again, Star Trek Discovery is doing okay in Germany. Actually, it's doing pretty good in Germany, and it's doing okay in the UK. But outside of that, there's a reason why Netflix aren't happy, because Star Trek really doesn't have that big a following. It's still very niche internationally. Personally, I think that's a shame. I think that Star Trek is a fantastic franchise. that more people should be into, at least good Star Trek. It has a fantastic message. It has pretty decent effects for the most part, at least when you consider the budget and when the relative series were made. But yeah, that's how it is. Let's see what you guys think in the comments. Do you have any opinions on this before we move into how I got into Star Trek, despite all of this? Yeah, as we see it, big in the UK and in Germany. Many point that out. That's also something that you can see on the convention scene. As some of you in the comments may have seen, Tom is right now flying over Colorado, which is pretty cool. So big yourself up, Tom, for going to Vegas. I would have loved to join you and be there. But anyway, that's then a Star Trek convention. What's interesting is that in Europe, there actually is a pretty vibrant convention scene. But if you go into dedicated Star Trek conventions, there's really only two countries that have them, and that's the UK and it's Germany. And the biggest Star Trek convention is called Destination Star Trek, and this rollates between different countries. These different countries would be the UK and Germany, the countries where the original series actually aired and built that brand and subsequent audience. That, at least, is my theory. Scott Fretwell points out that US military bases in UK and Germany, yeah, that might have something to do with it. I wouldn't discount that. Colin P. Smith says that I don't know about anywhere else, but here in the UK we had quite a bit of sci-fi in the 60s and 70s. Exactly, that's the key point. Doctor Who and, of course, Jerry Anderson. I'm not too familiar with those myself, but yeah, that's the thing. That's where the original series were, and where they weren't, you don't have Star Trek fans today, which just goes to show the incredible importance of brand value and brand identity, and how difficult it is to establish after the fact. Look at Star Wars today. Star Wars is big in the countries where it was always big. But in the countries where they don't have any nostalgia for it, where the brand wasn't already, it's very difficult to get a foothold. And this is the case with Star Trek 2, and why Star Trek is still lagging behind internationally compared to other comparable franchises, because the brand identity just wasn't there. Iridium in the comments just pointed out that Star Trek was aired in the Netherlands from the Next Generation forward. Yes, that is the case in many European countries. That's the case in my country too. I'll get back to that in a little while. From the 90s, things got a little bit better, which is why many places Star Trek Nemesis actually got a theatrical release, even in countries where Star Trek traditionally had been sent straight to VHS. Nemesis got a theatrical release many places. Of course, a very limited release, and it didn't last long because that movie flopped pretty much everywhere, because it was released just around the same time as one of the Lord of the Rings movies. I believe it might have been The Two Towers. So that didn't really work out all that well. As for me, though, that was the case with me. My first introduction was actually The Next Generation. Because for those of you who might not be aware, I grew up in Norway. And Norway is one of those countries where the original series didn't air, ever. Now, I'm in my late 30s, so I'm old enough to remember the time when Norway only had one channel, the state channel. And there was some good stuff on it, but there certainly wasn't anything like Star Trek. We actually had three channels. We had the one Norwegian channel and we got the two Swedish channels. And the Swedish channels, they had more entertainment. There people could see series like The Incredible Hulk and the 60s Batman. We got that from Sweden. We actually never had that in Norway either, but we were exposed to that by way of Sweden. But the original series, never. My first recollection of the original series is actually from watching Sky Channel, which we got on satellite from the mid-80s in England. I didn't know it at the time because there were loads of cool stuff. I was much more preoccupied with cool stuff like He-Man and Transformers and Fun Factory and stuff like that. But they had other things as well. They had the Time Tunnel, and they had like this thing with the weird colors. One which I recognized to be Lost in Space, and which I later recognized to be Star Trek. But I didn't know that at the time. But that was the first time I ever saw Star Trek. The second time I saw Star Trek was in the early 90s. Again, Swedish TV broadcast some of the original movies. So the first time I saw Star Trek, and I knew it was Star Trek, was actually Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I didn't see it from the beginning. I saw it from like halfway through. And it got me interested enough that I saw the rest of the movie. And then it would continue with Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, the week after. And I watched that, and that movie blew me away. I freaking loved it. That was the time when I wanted to see more Star Trek. But of course, there wasn't any. I had to rent the movies, and I didn't really find them. There weren't that many video rentals close to where I lived. But a couple of years after that, I think around 1996 or 1997, yeah, 1996, I think, that's when we first got Star Trek: The Next Generation on TV. By that time, we had gotten like 3 or 4 Norwegian TV channels, and one of them decided to then air Star Trek: The Next Generation. We'd still never seen the original series, but then The Next Generation was broadcast, and I was hooked very early on. I didn't love Encounter at Farpoint, but like the second, third episodes, I got much more into it then, and I became a fan, and so did a couple of my friends. It was still very niche. Most people didn't watch it. Again, it was by this time the first episodes aired were already like a decade old, and it showed at the time. But still, they were interesting enough to win some people over. That's when the fans of Star Trek in Norway, I guess, grew from a couple of tens to a couple of thousand. And I'm very happy to say I was among them. So I first got hooked in with The Next Generation. And yes, I see someone point out that that the original series was made by the Norway Corporation, by Double W. I wonder why Roddenberry called his company the Norway Corporation. Honestly, I've always wondered that too. I've never found an answer for it. I know that that was his tax shelter, but why he called it the Norway Corporation and not the, say, Sweden or Denmark or Tax Shelter Corporation, I have absolutely no clue. If you know, then please let me know in the comments, because I'd really like to know that. Anyway, then from the late 90s, that's when we got Star Trek: The Next Generation. And the first Star Trek movie that I rented, that I saw in earnest, was Star Trek Generations, which I rented. And that was the first time it occurred to me, or I understood that, okay, so we're dealing with 2 different time frames here. There's like 80 years between that movie with the whales and this Star Trek. I had no idea about it. And at the time, there was no way you could find that out. There was no books or anything like that on Star Wars to be found, or Star Trek, sorry, to be found in Norway at the time. So yeah, those were some revelations. Of course, it sucked a little bit to watch Generations in the middle of seeing season 1 for the first time. I remember I was curious, like, where's Tasha Yar? Because she was one of my favorites. Of course, I found that out soon enough. But yeah, that's the beginning of how I got into Star Trek. So my gateway was really Star Trek The Next Generation, which I then watched religiously as it aired over the next couple of years. And then later we got Deep Space Nine, which only aired for one season, which I was very saddened by. And then we got Voyager a couple of years after that, say in the early 2000s. Then Voyager started airing. I never liked Voyager as much, to be honest. I thought it was a wasted opportunity. And then I saw the original series, at least some episodes, because up until this point, I had still never actually seen the original series. There was no way to find it. There was no VHS releases of it in Norway. You could import it from the UK probably, but that was too costly and beyond my ability at the time. So the first time I saw the original series was in, I don't know, could it have been 2002, 2003, something like that? Then again, Swedish TV, it was the Swedish Channel 4, which then broadcast 10 episodes of the original series. That's the first time I saw it. That was pretty cool. It was a very good selection of episodes. They had like the typically best episodes, the one with the Guardian of Forever and yesterday's. I've forgotten the titles, but anyway, it was a really good selection of episodes. And did I like it more than The Next Generation? No, I didn't, but I liked it. It was entertaining. The first time I saw the original series from start to finish was when they were released on DVD in 2005. So I guess that's when you can say I became a real fan. Up until that point, I'd only been a fan of The Next Generation, but then I became a fan of the original series too. And then I saw Enterprise, basically as it came out, and I greatly enjoyed Enterprise. I'm one of the few fans of that series. Surströmming, I see many people say in the comments. That's Swedish. I've actually never tasted it. We haven't got that here. We actually have to go, drive across the border to Sweden. If I were to try surströmming, maybe I should do that some point. So yeah, that was the very brief story of how I got into Star Trek. So it wasn't until the early 2000s, say 2005, 2006. It was only then that I had seen pretty much everything of Star Trek. And that's when I counted myself as a huge fan of the property. So when the J.J. Abrams movies came out in 2009, then I was really, really excited about them. And I really enjoyed that first movie, and I was very happy to see so many others enjoy it as well, because it made the brand more accessible. Because that first movie actually worked as a gateway to get other people into it. That's the first time I had some of my friends ask me, like, "Hey, Andre, I know that you're a fan of Star Trek. Like, how do I get into this? Which episode should I see? What do I need to know before seeing the movie?" That never happened before. Before that, I was like one of a couple of weirdos that liked Star Trek when no one else did. So that was pretty cool. That's something that I actually appreciate the Abrams movies for. So I will say I'm a fan of the first one, and I'm a fan of Beyond as well. Into Darkness, not so much. But then again, neither is anyone else. As we heard J.J. Abrams even tell Quentin Tarantino. Let's see, Double W says again, somewhere I read that Norway was the name of the street that Gene Roddenberry lived on when he was growing up. Not sure if true. Yeah, that actually sounds true. That's so mundane and so boring that it is probably true. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Because to my awareness, he has no connection to Norway at all outside of the Norway Corporation. So then tomorrow begins Star Trek Las Vegas. I'm very interested to see what is going to come out of that. And that we will be covering at greater length following the revelations, because Midnight's Edge will be represented there. I, of course, will not, but Tom is there and Rob is there, and so is Mecca. So it's going to be pretty cool to hear what they have to say, which we'll get from the news as well. But there we're going to get on the on-site reports. So I'm looking forward to that. So next time, I'm sure I won't be alone, which is cool because I miss having someone to talk to here. Anyway, just got a $5 super chat from the Dr. 14 Blu-ray reviews. Sorry, £5 super chat. I'm watching Deep Space Nine. I am on season 5. My favorite character is Odo. Yeah, Odo is pretty cool. Personally, I liked Quark though, and my favorite episode of Deep Space Nine is the one with all the Ferengis when they go on a quest. That was a hilarious episode. So if you haven't seen that one yet, look forward to that one. That was brilliant. Vulcan Alpha says that rumor has it next year's Comic-Con people will be cosplaying Doomcock. That would be awesome. I look forward to seeing that. Maybe the real Doomcock is going to be among the attendees or among the cosplayers. That'd be pretty awesome. Snake56 points out the magnificent Ferengi. Yes, that's the name of the episode. That's a fantastic episode. And Read by Nature pointed out Quark versus Brunt episodes are great. Absolutely, they are. Brunt is one of the best characters in Deep Space Nine, played by the reanimator himself, Dr. Herbert West. Forgot his real name right now in the moment, but he's such a great actor. Lost Cause 78. Oh, is this an Andre only stream? Yes, this is an Andre only stream, and probably the only one, because as I just said, tomorrow I'll hopefully be joined by the rest of the crew, at least some of them again. So that'll be awesome. McBride Studios. How is the community Europe feeling about Picard and the other new projects? Well, I know in Norway, Star Trek Discovery has pretty much zero fans. Out of curiosity, I asked an employee at the biggest retailers, how much has Star Trek Discovery sold on DVD and on Blu-ray? And they said just a couple of copies. It's been collecting dust on shelves for months. So I don't think that Discovery has gone down all that well. Picard, on the other hand, that is something that I think is attracting a fairly good amount of positive hype among the comparatively few Star Trek fans there are. There are some Star Trek fans in Norway, but we're not that many still. There was like this Star Trek fan club in Oslo. I decided not to join because it was like 10 guys meeting up in a basement to watch episodes, and I decided, I'm good, thank you. So yeah, that, of course, that was a decade ago. There's going to be more casual Star Trek fans, but hardcore Star Trek fans in Norway, I don't know how many they are. Not many. Less than 1,000 are going to be hardcore Star Trek fans in Norway. See if there were any other cool questions here. I think I saw some. Give me a second. Yes, CDH Orge. Were the Star Trek series shown in Norway in English, Norwegian, or Swedish? Well, that's the thing, that all of the Nordic countries are subtitle lands, so nothing is ever dubbed. So the Star Trek series in Norway, the only one that was shown here was The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. That's it. Enterprise has, to my awareness, never been shown in Norway, neither has the original series. But those that were shown here were shown with Norwegian subtitles. What I saw on Swedish TV, which was then my first exposure to the movies, Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4, plus the first time I saw the episodes of the original series. That was then with Swedish subtitles, but being Norwegian, I have no problem reading Swedish or understanding it. Not that I would need it anyway, because I'm pretty adept at English too. And yes, Jeffrey Combs, that was the name. Thank you. And Richard Smits or Smits, sorry if I butcher your name, says the Netherlands also subtitles. Yes, Netherlands is also subtitle, and Germany dubs. That they do indeed, which is also why many Germans tend to be not quite as adept in English as, for instance, Netherlands or the Nordic, because everything there is dubbed to German. And that's true of every country where they dub. So it's not something particular to the Germans. On the contrary, Germans today are better in English than many others. But you have the same thing in France. You have the same thing in Spain. Wherever they dub, then understanding of other languages tend to go down. So I'm very happy to be from subtitle land. He-Man was my first English teacher, let's say. Oh, perfect. Oppirumpami.com. I'm a Norwegian Star Trek Discovery fan. Awesome. Big yourself up. You're one of 10, maybe. Who buys physical media anyway, Andre? Well, evidently not any fans of Star Trek Discovery. But yeah, fewer and fewer are buying physical media in Norway too, which I'm think is a great shame, because that's the only way that you can be sure that you will actually own um, the movies that you buy, because everything else is really just elaborate rentals that can be taken away at any time. Let's see, is there any other cool questions? Vulcan Alpha, I buy physical media. Yes, so do I. Support physical media. In Russia, STD watches you, says 16-bit mascot. Yeah, probably does. Elaine says, I hate the dubs, prefer subtitles. That way I can get the actor's full performance. Yes, agreed completely. Nothing destroys a movie quite like dubbing does. I know that Hitchcock himself said that he preferred dubbing rather than to have the image ruined by subtitles. I couldn't disagree with him more. For one thing, the image is not ruined by subtitles, but the audio is completely and utterly demolished by dubbing. Like, I can't physically watch movies with that are dubbed. I've seen quite a few movies in Spain which were dubbed to Spanish, and I have to credit them for the quality of the dubbing and the syncing with the lip movement, and even finding actors that kind of sound like the original counterparts, but still, no, it's just painful. Can't stand dubbing. For those of you that do, then all more power to you, but I just can't get into it. Brian Keller asks, did you get Babylon 5 in Norway? Yes, we did. I never saw one episode of it ever, but we got it. I know we had it. It was actually, I believe, more popular than Star Trek. There were more people watching Babylon 5 than were watching Star Trek The Next Generation. So a Babylon 5 reboot, I think, would do pretty good, at least in Norway. Don't know about anywhere else. But yeah, never saw it, but that was on. Hamuka says, no, Hamakua says, France dubs a lot. X-Files in French is hilarious. Yeah, France dubs everything. Not just the X-Files, but yeah, everything becomes inadvertently hilarious with dubbing, whether it's meant to or not. Apart from one thing that actually, because as I said, Norway is subtitle land, but there was one time that they tried to dub a series like a sitcom to Norwegian just to see how it would fare. And I do not remember the name of the series. I believe it was with Gregory Hines. It was a series featuring an all-black cast that then were dubbed into this hillbilly hick dialect from Norway. It had loads of viewers the first episode, just out of curiosity, and then that dropped like a stone. The subsequent episodes and the whole series was cancelled before it even finished airing. So yeah, that was not a success. Eric Pewmonger asks, are science subjects taught with English terms or the local language in Norway? Had to relearn lots of science terms in local language in my country, which is why I was discouraged. Well, actually, that's a little bit mixed because it's going to depend a little bit on the subject. At university level, pretty much everything is going to be using the English terms, which is why like learning science subjects at a Norwegian university in Norwegian is a little bit schizophrenic because you'll have everything else in Norwegian and then suddenly all these terms are in English and then they may be translated to Norwegian for colloquial use, but it's going to be like weird because these words don't really work in Norwegian. So yeah, it's a little bit of mix, but mostly I would say that the terms, at least at university level, are in English. High school level, they're still going to be, for the most part, in Norwegian. 1066 asks, Rob, did you win team trivia? I don't think that he'll be playing trivia this week because he'll be busy traveling to Vegas, lucky bastard. But yeah. Yaki Mock says, greetings from Germany here. Guten Abend. I basically grew up on the Next Generation and Voyager and Deep Space Nine. As far as I know, every Star Trek series and movie was dubbed here, and it made me an early fan. Well, awesome. As long as you got into it, that's the most important thing. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So I don't disparage anyone for liking dubbing. Like, if you grow up with it, then you really have no other choice. Then that's what's normal to you. In my case, I grew up with subtitles, so I'm used to subtitles, and I like subtitles. Oh, I even turned subtitles on when I watch a Norwegian movie because I like having them there. So, yeah. That's just how it is. But still, I maintain that dubbing destroys the original performance. CD Horde says, it's funny how many Swedish and Norwegian movies I've watched lately, subtitled in English. Oh, really? You've watched Nordic movies? Awesome. Which ones? Michael Keller also says the French dub everything, including French movies, as no one understands their gibberish language. Well, I'm pretty sure the French would disagree with that. Jean-Louis Leroy says, in Dutch, Warp 5 is Boogsnelheid 5. The Enterprise would not have lasted long if Dutch had been the language of the Federation. No, I think we can. No, actually, the funny thing with Dutch is that if you guys go to Norway for 3 weeks, you're fluent in Norwegian. And if you go to Sweden for 3 weeks, you'll be fluent in that. If you go to Germany for 3 days, you'll be fluent in that. So that's like the perfect melting point, a pot of various Germanic languages. So yeah, I think that the Federation probably would be pretty good speaking Dutch. Colin P. Smiths asks, did you ever get the British series Blake 7? No, I've heard the name. I've never seen it, so I know nothing about it. Sorry. Uh, Dr. Meatball says, Andre, do you think that CERN firing off in 2015 is what has propelled us into this parody dimension? Or you mean that put us into the Gillette timeline? I certainly hope not. Let's just say. See any other questions before we round off? Just have to get here. Give me a second. Yes, Scaro Trek sent us a $5 super chat. Thank you. One of my earliest memories was hearing the original series theme song. The 1979 film was great for the time. Star Trek died when they auctioned off ship models, 1966 to 2005. I agree completely. I remember when they sold off all the models in 2005 because I was thinking at the time, this can't be good. That they're selling everything off means that they're done. They're not going back to it. Because if they were going back to it, they would have kept some things in storage. But selling it off, that means it's really, really done, which indeed it was. So that's a crying shame. And I seriously hope that Picard can. I doubt that it will, but I hope that Picard will be able to bring back some of the magic that right now is kept alive by the Orville. Jörn Lieverud, who sounds like a countryman of mine, either that or from Denmark. I grew up with the Next Generation, and it was fantastic. The true PC origin, absolutely. Michael Keller asks, what are your thoughts on the memory beta fan novels? Also, some of the original Trek writers. I've never read them. Sorry, so I don't have an opinion. John Willis, Discovery on Blu-ray. Whoa, what a concept. Actually, you know what? I'm actually glad that they have released Star Trek Discovery on Blu-ray, as I wish they would do with every single Netflix series. My physical collection is still sorely lacking The Punisher seasons 1 and 2 and Daredevil season 3, and will probably never get them, and that really sucks. Scott Fretwell, if you like it, own it. Yes, absolutely. That's what I say. Own it and own it physically, because that way no one can ever take it from you. CMDR Pesip, do you think or know if Roddenberry was inspired by Kennedy, we choose to go to the moon too? Honestly, I don't think so. I think that probably was there in the background, but if anything, I think that was more something that would help him pitch Star Trek to the networks. But really, I think that whether Kennedy decided to go to the moon or not, Star Trek would have happened in pretty much the exact same form. Because for Roddenberry, it was more about the social aspect of it rather than the scientific. Because Roddenberry used science fiction at its best, which is not necessarily the cutting edge of science, but as a way to disguise and tell morality tales in a way that's going to be acceptable for those that need to hear them, which is what the best of science fiction does. So I honestly don't think that there was too much inspiration from the space race at the time. Cold War, obviously, but space race specifically, I really don't think so. If it was, I think that we would have seen more cold, hard science in Star Trek than we did. But anyway, that's my opinion. I could be wrong. That's just my guess. Um, Kiowas says, here in Spain, since the fifth movie never came to cinemas. Till Jar Jar movies. Yes, exactly. That's the same all over Europe. That the first few they came to cinemas, but they didn't really work out. And since then, Star Trek was for the most part relegated to direct to VHS, apart from in the UK and Germany where everything was theatrical. But outside of that, most of the original Star Trek movies were sent straight to VHS across Europe. Again, one exception was Nemesis, which got something of a limited release because by that time the Next Generation had been sufficiently on TV. But it wasn't until the Abrams movies that Star Trek got like the kind of exposure it always should have had, only came then. Lost Cause 78. Yeah, we used to have a lot of DVD Blu-ray stores here in Copenhagen. Not so much anymore. I have to order most of my stuff online now. Yeah, that's exactly the same thing in Oslo. In Oslo, there right now are, I think it's actually just one shop left. One in all of Oslo where you can buy physical media, which is a tragedy because I used to love all of those stores, which are all gone now. So that sucks. Are there any other questions here? Sany Boy 20. My family thinks that I'm crazy for buying physical media. Well, we're all a bit crazy some ways, and I think that's a good way of being crazy because you actually own your own content. If you watch it on Netflix or something, really you just rent it and they can take it away anytime. Slade Wilson, I don't need to support physical media. If it disappears, it's copyright-free MKV is easily stolen. Yeah, if you choose to sail the high seas with the pirate hat, then who am I to argue? Scott Fretwell, I hate dubbing. Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. Colin P. Smith, still blows my mind that Star Trek was over and done before Apollo 11. Yes, indeed. Indeed. I would have liked to seen Star Trek handle Apollo 11. That would have been something. I wonder how they would have addressed that on film. Lost Cause 78. The only dubbing I've seen is from German TV. I'm glad Denmark has always had subs. Yes, absolutely. We have German TV in Norway as well. And watching Star Trek in with dubbed to German when you're not German is yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Wouldn't recommend it. It's funny though with some of the titles because the Next Generation in German was retitled Raumschiff Enterprise, which means Spaceship Enterprise. I wonder what they did when the actual series Enterprise came. Let me know in the comments if you know. McBride Studios. I think it depends on how well it's done. I have encountered some media where the dub made all the difference. I think the difference is how tolerable it's going to be in a dubbed version. But again, it depends on preference. If you've grown up with dubbing and you're used to it, you're not going to be as bothered by it. John Even Bear also says, I also prefer watching foreign films with subtitles. Exactly, that's how they're meant to be seen. And CM, well, maybe it's Commander Pessip. In chess, we have some really good dubbing, sometimes sound better than original. Now, then I wonder, do you have real dubbing, or do you have the kind of dubbing that I've seen in Russia, where you basically have one guy narrating the movie? Because if that's the case, it may be so bad that it becomes hilarious, and then it might be better than the original if it's a bad movie. So, yeah. Professor Fernando Augusto Diaz Afonso. Dub in Brazil is good quality, but I prefer original. Yes, that's the best way. Good dub, but still go with the original. Psycho Kin Rassilon, having subtitles makes it feel like a visual novel. I disagree. I actually am. I'm completely blind to subtitles. I just register what's being said, but without it bothering me. So yeah. Michael Keller says, "Why not, Andre? Watch Babylon 5 now." Well, now I haven't got the time because I'm making content for all you guys, am I not? So, yeah, we'll see. Maybe in time for an eventual big screen reboot. Maybe then I'll go and check out the original Babylon 5. Till then, my days are too short to spend time on that. But maybe someday. Van183 says, I watch a lot of anime, all subbed. Can't stand a lot of the American voice casts. Yeah, I don't watch too much anime, but if you say so, I believe it. What little anime I do watch, I do prefer to have in either Japanese, I guess is the most common thing. Mark Oquist asks, did you get Farscape in Norway? I don't think so, not to my awareness. I've only seen the DVD releases of Farscape, so I know it was available on DVD here, but I don't know that it was ever released on TV in Norway. I don't think so. I really don't. Actioncom, Das Boot, best dubbed. That reminds me, I have to see the new Das Boot. I know that there's been like a reboot of it, and Das Boot is both a fantastic miniseries before and a fantastic movie. Great music to it, so I'm looking forward to seeing the reboot Das Boot. Unlike Babylon 5, that's something I'm going to spend time on today. So, yeah. Seeing the sights, optical applied subtitles did tend to degrade the film back in Hitchcock's era. Oh, yeah, good point. Obviously, that's not a problem today, as subtitles are digital. Yes, that's a great point. Babylon and Demon 308 says Babylon 5 was great. Plot wise, on par with Deep Space Nine. Budget wise, it was bottom tier. Yeah, that's basically what I've heard before. Let's see, any other cool comments? Dr. McElvoy says, be careful, Andre. Alex Kurtzman may steal your insights and try to pass them off as his own at Star Trek Las Vegas. Well, you know what? I just want them to do better. And if that means that Star Trek gets better, I'm very willing to have my ideas ripped off for the cause. Josef Petrik, I love Oslo. Visited Norway multiple times. Ah, awesome. Yeah, Oslo is a pretty cool city, all in all. Skaro Trek wonders, is Doctor Who ever played in Norway? I think that the rebooted series may have been broadcast here. I think it might have, but that would have been the first one. Before that, Doctor Who is completely unknown in Norway, and it never was aired there ever. Yaki Mox says they call the original series Raumschiff Enterprise. Really? I know they call the next generation Raumschiff Enterprise. Did they call the original series Raumschiff Enterprise 2? Well, maybe. I don't know. Let me know. Colin P. Smith. I'm old enough to remember Apollo. Well, congrats. And this must be these must be special days then with the anniversary and everything. Yeah, here, Michael Keller, he elaborates. Raumschiff Enterprise is the original series, whereas Raumschiff Enterprise, das Nachte Jahrhundert, is the next generation. Basically, then Starship Enterprise, the next century. That's a good title. Actually, I like that title better than the next generation, because there would have been a couple of generations in those 80 years. So the next century, yeah, that's a good title. Kudos. And Tom will be in Las Vegas in half an hour. Awesome. Enjoy it, Tom. I was in Las Vegas last year and I had a ball there, so I would have really liked to go back this time, but hey ho, it will be next time. And Yusuf Petrik elaborates, Enterprise was called already Star Trek Enterprise. No more Raumschiff, whatever. Yeah, there you go. Brian the Observer says, "Hi, Midnight Edge. I'm new. Well, welcome. Hope you'll stick around for some later live discussions as well, where I will be joined by others, so it won't be such an echo chamber. So that'll be cool." According to the IMDb, it's just called Star Trek Enterprise in Germany too, says Lost Cause 78. Okay, cool. Kevin Street. Achtung, Riker. Engagieren. Yeah, that's gonna be pretty. That's gonna sound pretty cool. I have to admit that. David Rayner says, "Don't know what I hate most: squinting at subtitles or listening to bad dubbing in American accents." Well, I think that you should hate the bad dubbing more, because the squinting at subtitles, with some practice, you'll be blind to the subtitles. You'll just absorb the information without thinking of them, whereas dubbing will sound awful always. Yusuf Petrik says, German Janeway was actually a far better voice than the original. You know what? I can believe that. Anti-Trekker. Oh, hey, Anti-Trekker. Glad to have you here. Anti-Tracker says, well, I have to say that while subtitles allow you to experience the emotion of the original actors, for someone like me who is dyslexic, dubbing makes it watchable for me. You know what? I can't argue with that. Simple as that. So on that one, I give in. But for everyone who isn't dyslexic, give subtitles a try. Carl Manvers, I prefer subtitles. I'm a fast reader and like hearing the emotional in the original voices of the actors. Exactly, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing, and it's completely lost with dubbing. Jim Ray asks, have you ever seen The Expanse? You know what? This is embarrassing, but I haven't, not yet. It's on my list of things to do. I know I'm, 4 or 5 seasons behind, so I need to get on that train. It's something that I've been wanting to do, but I just haven't had the time that I have to watch TV is more often than not dedicated to create Midnight's Edge content, because that's kind of like the time I have available. So I still have to watch The Expanse. I still have quite a few episodes of The Orville to catch up to, and also Chernobyl. I really want to see that, and Das Boot. So yeah, the day just doesn't have enough hours. Angron is Angry says, there is a movie called Babylon 5 in the beginning. It would be a good introduction and give you a feel for the series. Okay, cool. I'll keep that in mind. John Even Beer, have you played any Star Trek video games? I've only played a Next Generation game for SNES and I didn't get anywhere in it. This was before I got into the series. Actually, I haven't. I'm not that big a gamer, to be honest. To the extent of which I am a gamer, I'm a retro gamer. So I'd actually be more likely to seek out that SNES game than any modern game. But so far, no, I've never played a Star Trek game. If I ever got the opportunity, there's a Star Trek game I would like to make, but I'm not going to share the game mechanic of that one because that's too good to give away to Kurtzman, so I'll keep that one for myself, but you'd love it. Cynical Lindsay CSS. Don't feel bad, Andre. I just started season 1 of The Expanse recently. I've got a long way to go. Yeah, I've got an even longer one. John Willis, The Expanse titles are in Norwegian. It's a lullaby or something. Not quite sure what you mean by that, but if you mean the subtitles, well, maybe I have to see it. Cynical Lindsay, Chernobyl is fantastic, and Petfless G agrees with it. Yeah, that's the same thing I've been hearing, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Imperial Power asks, which Star Trek alien race is your favorite, and do you think a series based on board a ship other than a Starfleet one would work? I would say that to me, my favorite are probably the Romulans. And the reason that I like the Romulans is because they're passionate. The Vulcans, they're cool and all, but they're holier than thou, two-faced assholes that say one thing and do the complete opposite. Whereas the Romulans seem more genuine. Now, do I think that a series based on another ship than a Federation ship would work? I think the closest thing you're going to get to that is Deep Space Nine, where you then basically had a Cardassian station and you had all of these different races, but it still was obviously run by the Federation. And I don't think that there's any other way to do it. I know that many want a series where we follow the Klingons or something like that, but honestly, I think that would be too niche. I think it would attract too few people and it wouldn't work. It's something that you could do as a mini series. As a mini series, I can see it working. That's an idea that I'd be very happy to give to Kurtzman and the people running Star Trek right now, which really isn't him. He's a figurehead, but he's not the one pulling the strings from what we've been told. But miniseries, loads and loads of miniseries covering different aspects of the Star Trek universe, having some of those following an alien race, yeah, that I can see working. Stephen Klein asks, do you think if they're real international actors from around the world that are known for Star Trek, do you think it would be more popular internationally? So basically, what you're asking is if you had some internationally known actors that showed up in Star Trek, if that would work. Yes, I think so. I do. If you had, now I'm not a fan of Tom Cruise, but if you had Tom Cruise in a Star Trek movie, that would bring in international audiences that otherwise would not go. And the same is true for Will Smith and the other handful of people that still may pull a crowd all on their own. I think that would help. I really do. Read by Nature. Have you watched Swamp Thing? I think it's great, though there may be difficulty doing so for us Europeans. Um, yes. Yeah, I have not seen Swamp Thing yet, and you are right. Watching, if you take put on a pirate hat and you go sailing on the streams, then it's very very easy for Europeans to get Swamp Thing. If you don't, then it's going to be a little bit more challenging to see it legally. As for me, no, I have not seen Swamp Thing yet, for the much the same reason that I haven't seen the others. Plus the thing that, again, I'm in Europe, and it's much more difficult to bypass. I think that with a VPN, you can get like the DC streaming thing digitally, so that may be the way to do it. But no, I haven't seen it yet. What I do know is that it was botched towards the end, that they had planned multiple seasons, and they had planned a 13 episode first season, and then because of some tax stuff or something like that, I'm not sure of the details, then in the last moment they cut down from 13 episodes to 10 episodes, and then they canceled the entire series. So then I just know that however good the rest is, the ending is going to be bad and it's never going to be followed up. That I think is so frustrating that I may just give the whole thing a miss, because if I begin and I get into it, then it's just going to be all the more painful. So probably I'll skip that one. The Expanse. Google Lisbeth Scott comments on the meaning of the Norwegian lyrics she wrote to the main titles. Oh, is there a Norwegian lyrics in the Expanse main title theme? I had no idea if that's the case. Okay, I'll check that out then. And now I'm curious. Peter Banner, do you think that the Tarantino Star Trek film will actually happen? I don't know. Um, if I had to bet on it right now, I would say I would bet that yes, it's going to happen, but I wouldn't bet much, because there's loads of things that can happen between. Yeah, there's many things that have to go right before that happens. But after the Viacom merger, after Viacom and CBS becomes one again, and I do believe that's going to happen, then Star Trek is going to be a priority, and they know that there is some damage to overcome there. And I think that there's going to be a desire from very high up to fix the brand, and a Tarantino helped Star Trek movie, that's something that's going to attract international attention. It's going to do it right there. And then I think that the money is going to come. So, do I know it for certain? No. Many things can go wrong there. But if I had to guess, I think that probably is going to happen. Sister Harrow sends an Australian $10 super chat. Thank you. Why do you think Marvel haven't introduced Namor yet? I think that's because of Universal. Because the situation with Namor is pretty much the same as with the Hulk, meaning that Universal owns the movie distribution rights. That's at least is my understanding. So Marvel can still use him in their Avengers movies, but any solo movie is off the table. And because of that, they're not going to want to invest in any character that they cannot spin off, because they have such a massive library of characters. And any one character, if given the right treatment, can spin off a franchise of his own. And then it's simply a strategic decision not to waste time and resources on one character, actually the one character that they can use, but that can't be spun off into a separate franchise. I think that's the reason. Is there any other cool questions? Read by Nature. Tasha Yar's daughter was a great villain. Nemesis should have featured her instead. Yes, I agree completely. I was very sad to see Denise Crosby leave the series. I was very happy to see her return, and I wish that she had been the villain in Nemesis. John Willis, when you do listen to the Expanse title song, you'll have to give us an English translation. It's somewhat controversial for Norwegian speakers. Okay, I'll listen to it and see what I can find out. So just remind me in the next live chat, and I'll see if I can find out by then. Again, it's completely news to me that there's anything Norwegian about the Expanse. That shows you how much I know. Stephen Klein, have you ever seen Alien Nation? Is that a show that could get a reboot? Yes, I have seen Alien Nation. I love Alien Nation. Is the show that could get a reboot? It could, and in my opinion, it should. Alien Nation is great science fiction. I really enjoy Alien Nation, both the movie and the spin-off TV series. I still haven't seen the revival movies. Got to put that on my to-do list. Anyway, so yeah, Alien Nation, awesome. Om Acer, Benedict Cumberbatch was terrible as Khan. Yeah, I have to say I was pretty disappointed too, although that wasn't his fault. Larry, Swamp Thing, another casualty in the culture war. Is that what's behind it? Because I really haven't researched it yet. I wouldn't be surprised though if that too is a casualty of that, rather than something to do with tax cuts, which to me seems like a front. I don't think that they could be so stupid as to have a $15 million remission or something like that. Natasha Cloutier has something in Norwegian here. Is this the lyrics to The Expanse? I de sa morgenen jeg stige av søke, ja lyn tid jeg vet har delt. I think I'd like to hear the entire song, and then I'll get back to that. I understand each individual word there. Each word is fine, but I'd like to hear the whole thing. Hittibold aus Gras. In Austria, Star Trek is similar popular than in Germany because we got the translated episodes from Germany, I guess. Yes, that's the reason right there. That's exactly the reason. Deidrit, does Namor count as a mutant, or is that just Marvel messing with the backstory? I think no, Fox does not have a claim to Namor. No, he does not count as a mutant. He was introduced earlier, so no. From a movie point of view, he is not a mutant, and Fox has no claim on him. Richard Smeets, what do you think about the cancelled sci-fi series Space Above and Beyond? Never seen it, so I have no opinion on it. Sorry. Lord Hyena, is this the point where someone asks about Max Headroom? You just did, and I am a huge fan of Max Headroom, by the way. That's a great series. That's a pure cyberpunk series. You know what's funny? Is that the makers of Max Headroom are the ones that went on to make the Super Mario movie. Which makes me curious, the people that hired them, the makers of Max Headroom, to do Super Mario. What did they think would happen? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. John Willis, Alienation was made by the same people that made the $6 million Man. Is that the same guy that made The Incredible Hulk as well? Forgot his name, but if so, he's a brilliant producer. And Alienation is fantastic. Um, Angron is Angry asks, did he just summon Cthulhu? No, I spoke Norwegian. That's what Norwegian sounds like. James Davidson, Star Trek is big in the UK. That it is, as I said in the beginning. It's huge in the UK, it's huge in Germany. Other than that, not so much. Although it's growing. Lost Cause 78. Norwegian is so much more melodic than Danish. Yeah, it's difficult to disagree with that. Danish is a funny language, though. I can speak Danish too. If I'm completely drunk and put potatoes in my mouth and I try to speak Norwegian, what comes out will be Danish. That's like a Scandinavian joke. Oh yeah. Let's see if there are any other questions before we close out for the evening. Gabriel Chalidor, do you believe that Star Trek Picard will eventually lead to the events of Star Trek Online? I don't know I don't know too much about Star Trek Online. I know it takes place in the aftermath of the J.J. Abrams movies, but I don't know how long. If it's very long after, they're not going to care about it. They're really not going to care. J.J. Abrams has made that pretty clear already, that continuity really isn't all that important, so I don't think so. Deranged Lunatic says, I don't know how many people realize that Denise Crossley asked to be written out of the show because of the poor character growth for Tasha. Yes, that's true. She was the one that asked to be written out. I think that was a mistake. Because she wanted to have a career in the movies, and she was in Pet Sematary and a couple of other movies. But honestly, I think that she probably would have been better off staying with Star Trek. Nathan Norman, have you ever seen seaQuest DSV, and what did you think about it? I know of it. I'm aware of its existence. It actually went on TV in Norway, but I never saw it. So I have no opinion on it. Sorry. Joker's 79. Yeah, Gary Graham. He was on Alien Nation TV series and Enterprise. Yes, that's true. Ambassador Soval. He took on the role that that other guy had in the movie. So yeah, great actor. There's the Star Trek connection. Sven Martin, do you know anything about the new Judge Dredd? I just finished the Cursed Earth series. I know a little bit. I know that a movie definitely isn't coming. I also know that on the TV series, which is in development, there's going to be some delay, probably. I don't know any more details about that, but it's going to be a while before we get any more Judge Dredds. That I do know. We'll probably get more Judge Dredd at some point, but not anytime soon. Jean-Louis Leroy, have you seen Space 1999? I have. That's an awesome series. I really liked it. That's the kind of like look of sci-fi that I enjoy. There has been rumors of a reboot or a sequel. I hope for a reboot. I think there's no point in making a sequel to it. I don't think that there's a big enough fan base that you can do a sequel. But a reboot, give that a Battlestar Galactica style reboot that retains a little bit more of the original imagery. I'd watch the hell out of that. Andreas Böhm, have you seen Lex the Dark Zone? I've seen the DVD covers, never seen the series, sorry. Captain Robert April, Kenny Johnson. Yes, that's the guy. That's the one who did the Incredible Hulk as well. He's amazing. He's such a brilliant, brilliant TV producer. He's so underrated. He's like one of the best guys ever. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. That's the one, Kenny Johnson. Also a nice guy. Have you met him? I haven't, obviously, but I'm a huge fan of his work. I was blown away when I rewatched his pilot for The Incredible Hulk. After having watched the 2003 movie, I was like thinking, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with Ang Lee's movie when this pilot from 1978 is 10 times as good a movie? So yeah, massive kudos to Kenny Johnson. Let's see if there are any other cool questions here. Mr. H says the series is stalling. That, and if they don't release one before Warhammer 40k, they may miss their window. I would listen to Mr. H and everything that he says about gospel. No, sorry, everything that he says about Judge Dredd, you can treat as gospel. He has some rock solid connections there. So if you want to learn everything about Judge Dredd as it becomes available, then you go follow Mr. H Reviews because he's on top of that. I know a tiny little bit, but he knows much, much more. Eric Pewmonger, what do the Norwegians think of Swedes? Are they weird as what Tim Pool suggests, or that movie Midsommar? I haven't seen the movie Midsommar yet. What I will say is that we Norwegian people are very big fans of the Swedish people. Like here in Oslo, we love the Swedes, and we had loads of Swedes that were working here in Oslo, working in our service industry, because their economy really was no good. So they had to come here to get work, and that was fantastic. And then they went back after their economy recovered, and we still miss them. Swedes are awesome. Swedes are fantastic people. So we really like the Swedish people here. I don't know anyone who doesn't like Swedes. But that's the Swedish people. The Swedish government, that's a completely different matter. Everything that Tim Pool says about Sweden is true. It's all true. It's all horribly, horribly true. Here in Norway, we use Sweden as an example of how bad things can get. Sweden is what we don't want. We have an expression here, Swedish conditions. And Swedish conditions is lack of freedom of speech. It is political correctness gone absolutely mad, and it's the entire nation in a destructive cycle because of it. And that's what we, the closest neighbors, who are also fairly liberal, call Sweden. We use Sweden as a horror story and what to avoid. So everything you hear about how bad things are there, it's you don't even get half of it. It's that bad. But the Swedish people were huge fans of. Yes, Lost Cause 78 says the same thing. We have the same saying here in Denmark. Careful not to fall into Swedish conditions. Yes, Sweden really should be a warning to the world of how bad things can be. And there, I think that we've mostly caught up with the chat. I'm just going to go and check if there's any super chats that I missed, because that I absolutely would not want. So just give me a second to do that before we round out for the evening. Captain Hare said a Vulcan hello to you, Andre. Wait, that's a bad thing. Oh, well, I take it as a good thing. So thank you so much. That's the one that I missed. $5 from Captain Hare. Always welcome. Always welcome. Michael Keller says Swedish conditions also used already in Switzerland and Germany. Yeah, well, we have to make that more known. Everyone needs to know. Everyone needs to see how badly that is. Captain Robert April. So Sweden, great people, horrible government. Yeah, kind of, absolutely. Action.com. How did you like the portrayal of the Norwegians in the movie The Thing? If you mean the most recent thing, fantastic. Those were real Norwegians, even as the guy from Game of Thrones and everything. So those were just Norwegians being Norwegian. So that was Team Norway. So yeah, love that. That was awesome. In the original movie, then it's one guy who tries to speak Norwegian but fails miserably. That's an American. That's reading Norwegian of a paper. You can barely make out what he's saying, barely, but still pretty cool. Let's see anything else here. Ohm Acer, good man, Andre. Nicely hosted. Oh well, you're too kind. Thank you. It's the first time I'm trying the show on my own. And I notice right now how much I need the others to bounce off of. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. Kefir 1973, or we're going to get political here. Is there lots of love for Swedes since the Swedes allowed the Nazis through their country to invade Norway? I heard it shaped the relationship for a while. This is true. This is completely and utterly true. If you go back to but it's a little bit mixed though. Because if you go back to not my generation, not my parents' generation, but my grandparents' generation, then it was very, very mixed feelings towards the Swedes. Because yes, it's true. Sweden, the Swedish government at the time, again, Swedish government is no good. They allowed Germany to march through Sweden to take over Norway. So they were painfully chicken shit at that time. Again, not the people, but the government were horrible. But again, you have the people. What did the people do? Sweden were allowed to be neutral. You know what they did? They took on Norwegian refugees because many. Not random Norwegians. Random Norwegians did not flee to Sweden, but the people in the resistance, people with something to hide, people that were on death lists, they would escape to Sweden in safe harbor, and of course, then they would return again to Norway after the war. But so people give Sweden a little bit of a pass for them because they gave the resistance fighters free haven as well. So so yeah, plus for that. Nowadays, though, or I don't know when people kind of like forgave Sweden for allowing the Nazis to march through, but my generation, we have absolutely no resentment to Sweden for that. On the contrary, we think Swedes are awesome. Government not so much, but the people are awesome. See, what do you think has been the best ending to a sci-fi show? Hmm, interesting. Probably, if we count American Gothic, Sam Raimi's American Gothic from 1995 as a sci-fi show, then that was also a series that was meant to go on for longer, but they knew they got cancelled, and they were able to conclude the series in a very satisfying way. So I'm going to say that would be the best one. Carlos Ventures sends a $2 super chat. Tell Mecca she got a nice booty. I don't have to. Rob's going to tell her that. So yeah. Um, Deidrit, Google is giving me this comment. Apparently was on Wiki, but the comment got removed. Trivia. Norway was the name of the street that Gene Roddenberry lived on when he was growing up. Yeah, there we have it. That's probably true then. That's probably true. And then John Willis asks, wasn't that about the time of X-Files Fight the Future? American Gothic was a contemporary. Yeah, American Gothic was 1995, I believe. Briscoe County Jr. has the best sci-fi show ending. Oh, that's a series I never saw. I wanted to, but I never actually got to see it. But with that, I think that we're all caught up. And with that, I would like to thank you all for joining me tonight. And next time, I hopefully won't be alone anymore. So then we can probably give you a much more interesting, fruitful discussion. Till then, everyone, thanks for joining me and have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye.